You lovely people. But welcome to Most Highly Guided. My name is Lisa. Thank you so much for joining us. I've been speaking to some of you lately, and it is really lovely to actually speak to people that take time to listen to me waffle on or less waffling, reading the books. I have got a warm drink today because I have got a bit of a tickly cough, a bit of a sore throat and a headache. So the bugs are going around, guys. It's just that time of year. The weather is shifted. It's raining here today. It's been quite cold. So it's one of those put stews on, have warm, comforting food and stay all cozy. And yeah. So I'm going to get these videos done. And you will probably see me wearing the same clothes in both videos that go out this week because I want to film two together. So if I do feel worse, then I'm not letting you guys down with the videos. I'm sorry only one got out last week, but we had those technical issues and we have got some stuff going off in the family at the moment. So I am trying my best. But thank you so much to those that have messaged me and we've spoken on email. It is just a pleasure. It really, really is. And it's also, you know, we kind of feel starved for fellowship, I find. So I want this channel to be a place where we can come, where we can fellowship. And I've got a few ideas for that. So if that's something that you're interested in, please comment below. I'll do a separate video. I will. Talking about the plans that I have for that kind of idea. I've just been, you know, thinking things over and been in prayer about those situations. So, I have my nice tea and we are going to start with another chapter of Return of the Gods. Now, because these are so small, normally I just group two together. I'm sure you've noticed in the other ones. So we might even do a bit more than two, depending how we're going for time. So if I shut up, we can actually see how far we can go with this. So let's get to it, guys. This is chapter 37, The Stonewall. The goddess had always been known as the one who broke down barriers. She came to New York for that purpose. So there could not have been a more appropriate name for the place where she would break down the barrier than Stonewall. But could there be more to the mystery? The goddess on the wall. The Epic of Gilgamesh contains a vivid description of the goddess's raid. Ishtar attempts to seduce the hero Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh, in a blunt and cutting discourse, spurns her advances. Ishtar retaliates by cutting down the bull of heaven to wreak destruction on the earth. Gilgamesh and his associate Enkidu slay the bull. Ishtar then mounted the great wall of Uruk. The goddess takes her stand on top of the city wall and there gives vent to her anguish and anger and calls down curses on those who offend her. So the goddess who vented her fury on the city wall now, on the night that she would vent her fury on an entire civilization, chose her as a focal point, the place called Stonewall. There she took her stand and made it her platform, and from there she unleashed her anguish and fury. The Wall of Uruk. The ancient Wall of Uruk, or I think that's how you pronounce it, on which the goddess stood was made up of bricks. On the night of Stonewall, bricks had a prominent place. The Stonewall Inn itself was known for its facade, a wall of bricks. Beyond that, the Stonewall riots were begun, with the hurling of objects at police. No one knows exactly what those first objects were, but it was reported to have been bricks. Bricks become a very key part of the Stonewall mythology. The question, who threw the first brick at Stonewall, became a rallying cry for the movement. It is known that the brick-like stones were dug up from the nearby tree pits and were among the objects hurled at police officers at the beginning of the uprising. The Stone and the Stonewall. The immediate event that led Ishtar to stand on the wall and cast down her curses was Gilgamesh's slaying of the Bull of Heaven. But behind the slaying, the seminal offence that triggered all that followed was Gilgamesh's scathing rejection of the goddess's advances. As she stands on the wall, it is the first thing she speaks of. Woe unto Gilgamesh, who slandered me. How had Gilgamesh slandered the goddess? He represented a case against her. If he became her lover, it would bring him calamity and sorrow, as it had her past lovers, Tammuz and a long line of others. The goddess brought harm and destruction to those who loved her. She was toxic, unstable, and deadly. In his devastating attack on her history and nature, he used pictures, symbols, and one of these is of particular note. The goddess, he said, is a stone that buckles out the stone wall, the other stone wall. Thousands of years before the uprising of Stonewall, the words stone wall were inscribed on clay tablets. The word Stonewall was used in connection with the goddess of sexuality, of taverns, of prostitutes, and transvestism. Sorry, guys. Transsexually, homosexually, and the crossing of genders. Stonewall were the words and symbols used to speak of the goddess's destructive consequences on the world around her, and specifically on her own people, her lovers. Stonewall was used in the condemnation that caused her offence and ignited her fury. Now, the word Stonewall would again be joined to the goddess. Again, it would be used to cause her offence and ignite her fury, and again, it would become the symbol of her rage. The riots that erupted that night would leave Stonewall broken, burnt, and shattered. According to the ancient accusation of the epic Gilgamesh, the goddess would cause the stone wall to buckle. It was the most fitting of names and places, for at Stonewall the goddess would cause another wall, a wall of ancient origins, the moral hedge that had served Western civilization for nearly 2,000 years, to likewise buckle and collapse. There was an ancient symbol linked to the goddess's power, and it would accompany her when she entered into battle. It was the first sign of her coming. Therefore, when the goddess entered into battle at Stonewall, it was possible that she was accompanied by an ancient sign, and that it was the first sign of her coming there. Chapter 38, The Lion's Head. With the exception of the planet Venus, the star of Ishtar, no other image was so prominently associated with the goddess as was the lion. Labatu, the lioness. The goddess was called Labatu, the lioness. The title spoke of her power, her ferocity, and her savagery in battle. It appears in several ancient prayers and poems. Inanna, Ishtar, great light, lioness of heaven, my lady lioness of battles who challenges foreign lands. In heaven and earth you roar like a lion and devastate the people, like a fearsome lion you pacify the insubordinate and unsubmissive with your gore. On harnessed lions she cuts to pieces him who shows no respect. She who rides the lion. No other animal was so associated with the goddess. None other so graphically embodied her. It was the symbol of her divinity. It was the lion that carried her into battle. She is described as riding a chariot driven by 7 lions, and in carved relief she stands on the back of the lion or lions as she rides into war. Her power was so great that even the king of beasts yielded to her will and obeyed her commands. Thus the lion was her chosen platform from which she would wage war and inflict vengeance. The lion's head. But there was a part of the animal that most strongly displayed her power and dominance, the lion's head. The goddess is depicted in carved reliefs as holding reins, by which she turns the lion's head and directs the course of her entrance. In other reliefs, she places her foot on top of the lion's head. It was a sign of total dominance and uncontested power. Ishtar was the goddess who stood on the lion's head. Excuse me. Then there was the tactical dimension. The lion's head was the first, most glaring and most terrifying sight that an enemy would see as Ishtar approached to wreak destruction. The lion's head became, in of itself, a symbol of her power. It was the lion's head that crowned her scepter, and when she rode into battle, she would often brandish a curved sword, a scimitar, crowned with the lion's head. The symbol would serve as a reminder to her adversaries of the ferocity of her destructive power. The other Eshdam. If the goddess was to enter into battle, to engage in spiritual and cultural warfare, is it possible that the sign that accompanied her entrance into warfare in ancient times would manifest again? If Stonewall and Greenwich Village, which were to be the site where the war was to be launched, is it possible that the sign of her approach would specifically manifest there? The sign appeared, and it did so in the same setting as did Stonewall. In fact, on the same street, it appeared just 2 doors down from the Stonewall's front entrance. Like Stonewall, it was a bar, an alehouse, an Eshdam, dwelling place of the goddess. It chose as its symbol and its name a part of an animal. It was called the lion's head, the same sign that in ancient times represented the power of the goddess as she entered into war. The sign of her approaching as the Lion's Head would be the first sight of the goddess's approaching battle. So the Lion's Head Tavern appeared in Greenwich Village in 1966. It was the first sign of what was approaching. Later that same year, 3 members of the mafia purchased the property that would become Stonewall. The following year, in 1967, Stonewall opened its door. So, as in ancient times, the Lion's Head was the first sign that the goddess was coming. In ancient times, the Lion's Head accompanied the goddess into war. It would again in its appearance on Christopher Street in Greenwich Village. It was the first sign that a war was about to begin and that it would be led by the goddess, standing on the Lion's Head. After the Stonewall Uprising, one of the leading organisations of gay advocacy set up offices in Greenwich Village. Its headquarters were now located directly above the Lion's Head. It would now wage the goddess's war, just as the goddess had waged her wars in ancient times, stationed on top of the symbol of her power, the Lion's Head. So the goddess was power to siege and possess human vessels. If she was the principality behind the uprising at Stonewall, if she was inciting it, then it is possible that on the night of the uprising, she exercised her power to seize and possess. Is it possible that those who played a key part in igniting the explosion were acting as her avatars? And is it possible that one of them even appeared in her image? I'm going to go ahead and read a bit more, guys, I think. Let's see. The avatars. Let's go with that, chapter 39. The word avatar comes from a Sanskrit root word meaning descent. In Eastern religion, it speaks of a descent or manifestation of a deity in bodily form, an incarnation. We will use it here to speak of a human being who serves as a vessel for the incarnation of a god, as in a spirit, a host. Ishtar's avatars. The phenomenon, as we have seen, was common to ancient times and in pagan cultures where the spirit of God possessed its worshippers. We saw it in the ancient priests and priestesses who served as messengers of God. And we saw that the goddess Ishtar was especially known for possessing human vessels. So could the goddess, upon her return, use and inhabit a human vessel? Could her spirit possess and animate that vessel to act as her proxy? Could there have been at Stonewall an avatar? The warrior woman. If so, we would expect her to be like the goddess, female, and yet it would seem unlikely for a woman to play a central role in the Stonewall Uprising. As for the overwhelming majority, some would say as much as 98% of the bar's patrons were male, but there was at Stonewall that night a human vessel, a host, an avatar of the goddess, and it was a woman. We might expect the avatar to have been like the goddess, female, but with male attributes. And this is exactly what she was, a woman with male attributes. As Ishtar was a fighter, we might expect her avatar to be as well. And so she was. As Ishtar was fierce, so too was her avatar. And it was this one in the likeness of the goddess who would serve as the primary instrument to ignite the uprising. Arresting the goddess. In the myth of Ishtar's descent to the world of the dead, the goddess throws herself in a rage of Ereshkigal. I hope I pronounced that right. Goddess of the underworld. Ereshkigal responds by ordering her arrest and imprisonment. Ereshkigal opened her mouth and spoke to Namtar, her messenger, and she addressed herself. Go, Namtar, imprison her in my palace. Ishtar is apprehended and imprisoned in the place of Ereshkigal. So as the mystery replayed, the woman who acted as Ishtar's avatar, was apprehended and arrested. And it was that apprehension and that arrest that would trigger the riot and the movement that would alter world culture. The igniter. It happened as the police were making arrests of the patrons inside the bar, then taking them outside to the police wagon as the crowd outside stood watching. They brought out the woman with masculine features, the avatar in handcuffs. According to eyewitnesses, she was fierce, violently fighting with at least 4 of the police officers as she shouted, protested her treatment and cursed at them. The fighting was said to have lasted for about 10 minutes. It was then that she shouted to the crowds the words that would spark the uprising and the movement. Why don't you guys do something? She was then heaved into the back of a police wagon, and it was at that moment that everything changed and it all began. The Avengers. In the myth of Ishtar's descent, it was the goddess's disappearance, her apprehension, and her imprisonment that led to the issuing of the appeal and to call to her to release her. The call would be answered, depending on the version of the myth, by the Kurgara, the Galater, or the Asinu. They were all intersexual beings, and their names were given to the goddess's priesthoods, which included men dressed as women and men who had sexual relations with other men, male prostitutes, and feminized men. So on the night of Stonewall, it was the apprehending and arrest of the goddess's avatar, the raging woman, that would produce the call to action, and those who would answer that call and rise up in the angered frenzy that became the Stonewall riots would be intersexual or cross-gendered individuals. They would include males dressed as females, males who had sexual relations with other males, male prostitutes, and feminized men, as were the priests of the goddess, the Kurgara, the Galator, and Asinu, each of whom bore the name of the beings that came to her rescue in her imprisonment. The Cursed. The myth identifies another characteristic or people group upon Ishtar's return from the dead. The intersexual beings that came to her aid are cursed for doing so. The curse is invoked by Ereshkigal. It was this: the sewers of the city shall be your drink. The shadow of the wall shall be your station. The threshold shall be your habitation. The besotted and thirsty shall strike your cheek. In other words, they would live in the city as impoverished and homeless. They would dwell in the shadow of the city wall. So the other segment or characteristic of those who took part in the uprising was the homeless. They were the homeless male prostitutes who took refuge at Stonewall. They dwelled in the shadow of the wall, and they too would play a leading role in beginning the riots. They tear away the wife. In the myth of her return, the goddess is accompanied by demonic entities. They are described as having an agenda to separate man and women and husband and wife, breaking apart marriage and family. They tear away the wife from the man's embrace. They snatch the son from the man's knee. They take the wife away from the man's embrace. So the goddess's most dramatic return to the world would be joined to the spirits that separated man from woman and woman from man, and that would work towards the deconstruction of marriage and the disintegration of family. The moment of frenzy. As the fighting woman was put into the police wagon, a spirit took hold of the crowd and turned it into an angry mob. The situation quickly turned dangerous, and the crowd in the accounts of eyewitnesses went berserk. Who was the avatar? Who was the woman who incited the crowd and sparked the movement and everything that would follow? There's only one serious contender, a woman identified by name by several eyewitnesses. Though her later recollections were not always consistent, she would confide in and acknowledge to others that she was indeed the one. She was definitely at Stonewall that night and definitely fought back against the police. Whether she was the woman or one of them, she became the face of that resistance, the one who, in mythology of Stonewall, sparked the uprising. Protector of the alehouse. In view of all this, her profile is striking. Like the goddess, she had masculine attributes. She was a male impersonator. Like the goddess, she was a fierce fighter. The goddess was the patron of Eshdam and the protector of the alehouse, so the woman believed to have sparked the Stonewall uprising would become known for serving as a protector of the alehouse. She would work as a bouncer for the lesbian bars of Greenwich Village. She would patrol the streets of the village as their guardian. Charging storm. Ishtar was the goddess of storms. The storm exemplified her nature, unpredictable, fiery, violent, stormy. Her roar was like thunder, her destructiveness like lightning. Ancient Sumerian and Akkadian writings joining the goddess to the storm are numerous. You charge forward like a charging storm. You roar with the roaring storm. You roar with the roaring storm. You continually thunder. I don't know why any of you listen to me read. Me getting my words jumbled up all the time. When the goddess displayed her power or her anger or entered into war, she did so as a raging storm. She brought out magnificent battle and called up a great storm. Covered in storm and flood, great lady Inanna, Ishtar, you destroy mighty lands with arrow, strength, and overpower lands. You kept on attacking like an attacking storm, kept on blowing louder than the howling storm, kept on thundering louder. Loud thundering storm. The identification of the goddess with the storm is so strong that in an ancient Mesopotamian hymn, She is herself addressed as a storm. Loud, thundering storm, proud queen of the earth gods, supreme among the heaven gods. Loud, thundering storm, you make the heavens tremble and the earth quake. Great priestess, who can soothe your troubled heart? You flash like lightning over the highlands. You throw your firebrands across the earth. So the goddess was given the title Storm. And at Stonewall, she would live up to it as she displayed her power, her anger and fury, as she entered into a battle as a raging storm. So what was the name of the one who served as her avatar that night? The name of the one who was known for sparking the riots and the movement of that came from Stonewall was unique, and her name was Stormy. Both the goddess and her avatar bore the name Storm. The storm unleashed. So the Stonewall uprising and the movement that would trace itself to that uprising were ignited by a female with male attributes, a fighter, a protector of alehouses, a fierce, angry, raging leader of those who crossed the boundaries of gender, the inciter of a multitude of feminized men, a mysterious figure known as Stormy. Was it the goddess or was it her avatar? That night it made no difference. It was both. They acted as one. Ishtar has returned. The same spirit that took hold of the multitude at Stonewall would, in time, take hold of millions. It all began that night when she set in motion a disturbance and movement that would transform world culture. She would unleash a storm. In the midst of the fury and violence of the uprising, a strange thing happened to an objective observer. It would have made no sense, but it too was part of the ancient mystery. It was the dance of the goddess. Now, I find it interesting how there's always something that comes before a door gets swung wide open, and we've seen that as a pattern throughout this book. Sorry guys, that chapter's finished now. But when it was saying they tear away the wife, so we know that the breakdown of marriages has been going on a long time. Half of it is because of these famous people, having the influence on young girls. I was one of them. My era was like Destiny's Child and Spice Girls and stuff, and that was all about women empowerment and girl power and being an independent woman. So that starts to sow the seeds in the minds of these young girls that are going to become women. So they no longer seek that family unit, having a husband. They seek to be, really like the goddess when you think about it. Self-serving. And, strong, a fighting woman, and the Bible warns us about these kinds of women. But that's what was going through my mind when I was reading it, which I find interesting. So then they break down marriages and the man and woman. And then years down the line, they start to even break down the gender of a man and a woman and what that means. So that is so interesting how you've got to watch for these little things that open the doors to much bigger things. And I'm not saying destroying marriages and changing, women's perception of what it is to be married and have a husband and vice versa, because that's a huge thing. If you break the family, there's a lot of things that you can destroy, generations. And that's the way that the world is just a state, because it comes from broken families. And my parents separated when I was quite young, and that had a massive effect on me. Life become very unstable, and I felt very protected in my family unit, and it felt like normal life. And then when they separated, everything just went wrong. And I'm not saying my mum and dad's marriage breakdown is responsible for me, but that's where I was abused by a paedophile, at a very young age. So it's just, would that have happened if, my mum and dad were still together? Probably not, because I wouldn't have been with the person that was in touch with that person, you know what I mean? So it's just, I'm not blaming them for that, because that's just, that's not their fault. But I'm just saying there's a pattern and a rolling stone or a rolling snowball, and it just gets bigger and bigger, and then these things can happen. I mean, it's an example of how one small thing can lead to something so huge. And, that's when my childhood got really sad, really. And there was a lot of just unsettled and unanswered questions. And, it was just an awful, awful time. So I've learned you know, praise the Lord for working on my heart, the importance of a family unit, because yes, I had that as a child, but it was taken away, like I say, at a young age. And then I've had to relearn, because yes, I was influenced by all of these people. And then obviously from what I've been shown by adults around me, they sort of, you know, fed the fire of that message. So it's really important what, you know, what example we show our children in how to be a woman, a wife and a mother, and the importance of that. And, you know, what do we show our sons to what they look for in a wife and a mother, you know. And I'm also trying to even explain to my kids the importance when you grow up. I says, because it's nothing you need to think about now, because obviously I've got kids of varying ages from 21 to 9. So, yeah, it's just the examples and the lessons that we teach them. And obviously we're going to tell them things so they don't make the same mistakes, but whether they listen or not, but it's definitely our job to make them aware of, you know, the world. Like, you've got little boys and girls saying, I've got girlfriends and boyfriends, and some parents actually okay in this. Like, oh, so-and-so's boyfriends come over, like, what are you thinking? They're like 12. I'm telling you, there's no boyfriend or girlfriend that's going to come in my house at the age of 12. That don't exist. Like, I just tell my kids there is no boyfriends or girlfriends. We have husbands and wives, because I've lived and made a mistake of living that life. So I know the damage it causes. And I'm just being honest, guys. I'm not here to pretend that I'm holier than thou. I've lived a life that is before I was saved. And the Lord still saved me. And I hope my example of the life that I lived and the mistake I made would help you see that the Lord can save you too. I do not want to sit here ever and be self-righteous, because I have got nothing to boast of anything of myself. But, you know, the Lord continues to work miracles within me, and I thank him every single day. To do that. And also, I was reading, random side note, you know, when it was on about Stormy, well, one of the Kardashians have got, and I don't really watch them, but obviously you see them about with their kids in news or wherever, because they drive me insane. Because I think they're also spreading the wrong message, just like the goddess. One of their kids is actually called Stormy. So they show you who they are by these little things, like, you know who they serve, and you know all of that kind of stuff just by these little bits of things. Obviously it's not no fault of the child, but it makes me wonder, you know, was that because they serve Ishtar? So, well, you know, in celeb culture, like, goddesses and all that kind of stuff is massive. Like, it's always all out over there. The women think they are untouchable, but they're not. And one day they're going to realise that. So I will stop waffling, because we're nearly at half an hour. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Sorry about me having to keep clearing my throat and getting the words jumbled up. But hey, I'm still going to keep pushing through as long as you guys will have me. So thank you so much. And I will see you all in the next video. Bye, guys.